Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean, and we talk about what you might do about them. Joining me today is Carolyn Troyan. Carolyn is president and CEO of Leadership 360. She's been in this business for ever. 25 plus years. And as many of you in HR, she gets involved in a little bit of everything. She's worked in a lot of different areas. She's held executive HR roles at some high-tech firms. She's done rewards consulting at Mercer in a prior life, which is where we first met, and I won't mention how long ago. Welcome, Carolyn. I'm excited to have you on the show today.
Oh, Teri, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and good. Don't mention how long ago that was, but
I know. It seems like another dimension, another world, right? Yeah, I was reminding my husband earlier. I said, "Hey, Carolyn's going to be on the show today. Remember, she used to work with me at Mercer when she was in Detroit, and remember we had dinner with her in San Francisco." He's like, "Oh yeah, of course I remember Carolyn." So yeah, great. Another time, another place. So you and I have been having conversations lately and talking about all sorts of things, people from leadership, coaching to compensation and building teams, as well as staying ahead on tech. Which is another story. From our last conversation, I realized I really hadn't talked much on this show about team effectiveness. And this has become even more important and challenging given today's work environment. So I was hoping that we could talk about building effective teams today and even how to be an effective team member. Does that sound like a good plan to you?
I love it. It's my favorite work I get to do. So yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Then let's get into the huddle. So I know you've been delivering a lot of projects very recently in building teams, and a lot of people like to talk about team effectiveness, but I'm not sure. I think if you ask them to define it, I think they might struggle a bit. It tends to be one of those things that depends on the environment and the culture and the work. And while many people may not be able to define it, they know it when they see it. Right? They know a good team when they see it. Can you kind of just give us your thoughts on that? What are some of the common characteristics of a team that you've seen and sort of how you might define team effectiveness?
Yeah, I mean, team effectiveness, first, I think you have to start with defining what is the team, because, people might say, well, the team is like 1,000 employees and we're all in HR together, So typically when I do the work with teams, it's a relatively small group, anywhere from 3 to 12 people. And the key is that they meet on a regular basis and they're collectively responsible for results. Sometimes people say, oh, it's just everyone who reports to this manager. That's the team. They use reporting relationship. And that actually you can miss a couple important team members, like, maybe an HR member who sits on a leadership team who really is on that team with them, trying to get to results alongside them. Or you might misconstrue a team. Maybe there's a leader who has lots of different areas of responsibility, and those people come together, but they are really not collectively working together toward results. Maybe they own legal and HR, or, there's not a clear common goal that team has. So I think the first assessment I usually do is who's on the team, what makes up this team. And to start doing this work, I would say teams need to have worked together for at least 2 to 3 months so that they kind of get a sense of how it feels to work together, what the goals are. You got to give some time for people to work together before they're like, oh, this is working, this isn't, or this doesn't feel right. But usually when I catch teams around the 2 to 3 month period, they're ready to talk about team norms, understand what's working or not working, figure out if they have clear charters and objectives. So that seems to be the best time. And then the other question I usually ask is, how stable is the team? And this is really hard in high change environments. And this is where
Yeah.
teams struggle. Every time more than half the team changes, it's a new team. You can have one or two people change in and out, and you can kind of get them up to speed, like, hey, here are our team norms. This is the work we've been doing. But when it's a massive change, you almost have to treat it like a new team. And so sometimes it can be hard for teams to get traction then on how do we work well together when they're in this really high change environment.
Yeah. People work on a lot of different teams and organization, right? I mean, you're part of a department, but at the same time, if you're a comp person, you're part of the comp team and you have your role there. And then you're part of some cross-functional teams, like working with recruiting or working with department heads or even marketing for that matter. Like, what's the average number of teams people are on? And do they even think about it that way, right? Because sometimes you think about a team as being, well, I'm going to go work on this project team to implement something versus I am on a team every day. I'm part of a broader team with a large set of goals, right? So I was just thinking about that, like, is there an average number of teams people are part of? And, that kind of changes throughout their career, right?
I agree. Yeah, I think it also depends on your role too. Like some people may have a very specific role that they're doing and they're not really involved and maybe they're just on one team. But when you're maybe a support group or you're in a company that has a matrix organizational design, it kind of forces you to be on lots of different teams and for different time lengths. And I think, one of the things that's interesting that I've been reading in some of the research is sort of like, what is your main team?
Yeah.
And I'm like, does that exist anymore? Because I think people are on lots of different teams. And I think the key is the length of time you're together. Like you might come together really quickly. You have to, quickly get to how are we going to work together as a team, get feedback on how things are working, but then you disband.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the teams that I work with are a little more permanent. They're like working together over multi-year objectives. And so team change takes time. It's not something you can just go from dysfunctional team to highly performing team in a matter of 3 weeks. Like that just doesn't happen. It's part of the change process. So
Yeah.
I try to work with teams that, have sort of a longer term horizon, but I think the reality is a lot of the work that we do in those teams can be kind of like, shortened and best practices shared with smaller teams that maybe are getting together for just 6 or 12 months. That could work.
Yeah.
But where you see the most productivity, I think, is where you're working with the same team over at least multi-years and gives them time to practice the behaviors and build that muscle together
Yeah.
and learn about each other and how decisions are made as a team. So it's an
So it
interesting.
tends to be people that are part of the same department that are working toward a common set of goals for that department, and they kind of know what their accountability and roles are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got
When
it.
you look at these teams, do you then often look like up through the organization, like what's happening at the leadership level, and is this whole concept of team effectiveness like shared at the most senior level? Like this is just such an important part of organizations these days. And I think there's still this challenge where people get to these higher levels in the organization and maybe haven't led big teams or don't necessarily have ideal experience or the right skills for that. And it just seems so critical a component. And if it's not being shared at, if there's no shared leadership around it, to me, it makes it hard for that team to do well.
Yeah, I think I'd say two things on that. One is some of the most successful CEOs like understand that teamwork is a competitive advantage and that they sort of, as they build their values as a company, they sort of focus on that and say, okay, if we could be better at teamwork than our competitors, we're going to make better decisions. We're going to make decisions faster. We're not going to get caught up in politics and slow down. And so I think the best CEOs, you always hear them talking about high performing teams, how to build high performing teams, because they know if they can do that better than the company that they're competing with, they're going to win regardless. They're going to create better products. They're going to get them to market faster. And so I think most CEOs get it. I think the question, I was thinking about this last night, like, why wouldn't you as a CEO to spend almost a lot of resources and time on this? Like if you truly believe that.
Yeah.
But I do think, I've seen teams and many of the leaders I worked with worked at big companies where there are multiple cultures, or it really is up to the team. Like you could have a leader who believes in this, who's good at it, and you have a team that really wants it, and they can be high performing even in a dysfunctional organization, is what I've
Yeah.
found.
Yeah.
So I don't think it stops a team from saying we want to be the best team in our company. And so we're going to spend time on these issues and we're going to try to get better and build that muscle as a team. And some of the best companies I work for actually study those teams. And they're like, what are they doing differently? Why are they high performing? What are they
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
trying to understand them so that they can replicate it across the company? So they'll have, one HR team had a small, maybe 2 to 3 people that just focused on team performance. That's all they did. They studied the most high performing. You see that at some of the other high performing companies doing that. So I don't think it stops you if you feel like it's not on the executive radar. If you have a leader who's passionate about this and a team that wants to figure it out,
Yeah.
you can become a high performing team. It doesn't really stop you. But gosh, just think of the results if everyone was doing that would be phenomenal. What a fun place to work. That's what I would think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
What are some of the things that people are experiencing that cause them to say, hey, we need some help here? Like we need to figure this out because, in order for us to achieve our business outcomes, we've got to be operating on all cylinders and we're not. What are some of those things that you run into the most that people say, are the reasons their teams are not running effectively and they need help?
yeah. I would say sometimes they don't know what the cause is, but it just feels political. There's a very low level of trust in the team, so they can't really have effective, productive debates on issues. One of the symptoms is usually very boring staff meetings where nothing really gets said. We might present something and the meeting ends. And so what you think would be like, oh, what a great team. Like, they all
Everybody's
get along.
happy.
There's no
Everything's
debate.
good.
They must be happy. Those are actually some of the lowest performing teams because the reason why that's usually not happening is they either aren't committed to the goals or there's a very low level of trust. And so the conversations are happening maybe in Slack, not in the meeting, and so you see these symptoms that kind of pop up. And usually people are saying, God, this just doesn't feel good. I'm not enjoying it. I don't feel like my views are valued. It's not a safe environment. I don't have psychological safety in this team to really talk about what I want to talk about. So you see what I would say is sort of all of these symptoms of a non-high performing team. And then usually they're not getting results. So they're frustrated.
Yeah.
Like, why can't we hit this goal? They just
It's
sort of
not
go
that
in
hard.
Yeah. Like we should be able to do this. We're all smart people. So yeah, that's you usually hear a lot of those stories. And then, you hear stories of what it feels like to be on a great team. And that's usually where I start is let's tell all the stories of the great teams we've been on. What were they like? What were some great teams you were on to describe what they felt like to you?
Yeah. God, I feel like I've been on so many teams throughout my career, but when I've been on a really good team, and I love you really focused on trust on this last one. That was key because we trusted one another. We knew that the things that we said, if we didn't like something, we didn't think it was going the right way, or we wanted to disagree, people were comfortable doing that and not feeling like they were going to get backlash. Right. It was like, hey, it didn't have to be insulting, but you could say, hey, I don't know, I'm not feeling it. Like, can we think about this? Can we talk about this more? Can we think about a slightly different approach? And when everybody's kind of excited about that or wants to hear other people's ideas, they're not sort of set in this mindset where here's the way we've been told to do it and here's the way we're going to get it done. I find that trust and autonomy were huge on those teams. Like we had the autonomy to make our own decisions
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, we informed leadership, but we didn't have to be like, we didn't have a mandate to say, you got to do it this way. It was, here's what we need you to accomplish. And it was up to us. And that to me created this level of creativity in the group, but it gave people the license to trust, because maybe, they didn't know everything, right? You couldn't do it by yourself, right? You needed other people and their expertise. And I think if I could circle back to the beginning, we made sure everybody knew each other and they knew why they were in that group and what their specific skills were and what they brought to the table. A lot of times you find people, I've gotten thrown into teams before where people don't know me. They don't know anything about me. They don't know why I'm there, and yet you're expected to perform with this other group of people that you're all just trying to figure it out. So you spend way too much time forming that whole forming, norming, storming, whatever the order is. And, I think there's better ways to sort of build the teams when you decide you need a team to do something very specific.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you touched on so many things in the research. One is there's a study done that shows that teams that meet in person only once are like 5 times more effective than the other team. It only takes one meeting.
Yes.
I think it's what you do with that meeting. And you go back to this idea of trust. And a lot of the research shows, and if you look at a lot of the models, it all starts with vulnerability-based trust. That if you share something about yourself, something that maybe you're not good at, or a lesson you learned in your career, or God, I'm a little worried about this project I just got given, anything like that. And it could start with something easy, like my first job and why I hated it, or I loved it, like just, those conversations going. And then it's only until you get that trust level that you can actually move to the next level, which is productive conflict, which you talked about, which is, I feel like we could have the tough discussions as a team. And out of that, you end up getting very high commitment to the result. So one of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years, which was interesting to me, is that this idea of not everyone has to agree. They just have to feel heard. So I can still commit. It's, I think Intel called it disagree and commit. So this idea, like if you have trust and then you have these really productive discussions and debates, then everyone's sort of committed, even if they didn't agree to begin with, that was the path, because they feel heard and they can get on board and sort of drive to those results. And so I think it all kind of builds on each other. But this idea of autonomy is also interesting. The other thing that you find in high performing teams is that they take on a lot of the accountability, for all of the results, and less for the leader. The leader does a little bit of it, sort of making sure that the debate framework, are you talking about the right issues? Is the team, if the team's split, they make the call, but the accountability comes from the team itself and saying, we're going to miss the goal. I see you're struggling. Could I send some resources over? Or I really feel like this went way off the track. Can we talk about what's going on? And it might not even be in their area. But that's sort of one of the hallmarks of high performing teams, is they end up taking on more of the self-policing of accountability on how the team operates and getting results.
Taking that, because they have to have accountability for the whole thing, right? It's not, if you just have accountability for your piece, you're not going to care, right? So you really do have to instill that overall level of accountability. And I've seen that, that is, again, when people are working remotely now, and a lot of people have never met in person. I mean, I've seen major things happen when people meet in person.
Yeah.
I had a guy that worked for me a long time ago, and oh my God, just fabulous guy. Everybody loved him, except this one client who he had never traveled to, he'd never met in person. I had multiple calls with them, but it was his mannerisms on calls that they didn't understand because they didn't know him. He had this tendency to, like, whenever he would answer a question, he'd have this big sigh before he would answer the question. And it came across on a phone call and not video as oh, we asked a stupid question, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I said, look, we're going there next week. We're just going on site. We're going to go and we're going to work a couple of days with this client on site. Changed everything, right?
Yeah,
Because that they sort of, in addition to the other components, they also sort of got to know him and his mannerisms. And, it's little things like that. Now we have a little bit more of that with Zoom, but, in the old days when you just had a phone call, I mean, there was so much unsaid, body language and everything else that you just couldn't pick up on. So I do think, and I love that that's in one meeting, like one in-person meeting has made a difference, because I've seen that happen.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, and I think as people are redesigning their work models, they're figuring this out, right? That a fully remote model works, but the team has to get together at least once a year, like, like maybe quarterly,
spend a little money on travel. It will pay off in the long term, right?
It does for teams. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different approaches and frameworks and things like that out there. How do you typically approach this? Like, do you use a specific framework or different frameworks depending on the situation? Talk a little bit about your approach.
Yeah. I think it all starts with deep listening to the team, and there's a couple ways that you can go about it. One is you can use your engagement survey and have a team section and then use those results. There are free surveys online. The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team book, which I love, has a free survey that you can do, or you can have a consultant come in and do the survey. I personally love doing interviews with the team and sort of going through all of these different behaviors and having them give me the details of what's holding them back. I just think it's just, you have more of a back and forth. You can ask follow-up questions, and it's a similar methodology. You're just able to get deeper into what's happening with the team. So I also find that the team has to be equally part of the process. And if they bring in someone to help, I always have the team interview me. Like, it's not just the leader. So the team has to feel like they own the outcome of the work as much as the leader does. So I think that's an interesting part of the process.
I like that.
Yeah. And, I think there are different frameworks. I think the key is, if you can find, like, the 5 Dysfunctions of the Team framework I use, they have data on thousands and thousands of teams. So you can compare yourself to other high performing teams. And if you have a very analytical group of leaders, like maybe engineers, they love that. They're like, where do we stack up? Like, we're better at
benchmark
that team. So just having, you just have to get to know the team, and are they very data oriented, or they really want to understand more in a deep way how they're doing it. But I think having a very simple stepped process that kind of gets them through building trust, and then having productive debates, and then building commitment, and then moving to the highest level, which is like taking accountability. And what does that look like? And a lot of teams struggle with that. They may get up to, we can have good debates and we're committed, but actually, what they see as calling out their peer for not performing feels very scary still, even when they can have the toughest of debates, but that's where I see even some of the high performing teams struggle. So it's a process, and typically I'll go in, we'll work together for a month or two, and then they'll work on some of the behaviors, and I'll come back and re-interview or survey 6 to 12 months later. And where are we? Because it's culture change, it takes time. So that's sort of the process that I use. And I think the key is the team is along for the journey. I think too many times the leaders try to go it alone, and they're like, hey, I've done this, I know what I'm doing. I'm just going to start implementing some of these practices to get my team to have better debates and that it feels safe for people, which is great. But I think if you sort of sign up the team to go along the journey with you, and then they sort of feel ownership around the team culture more than just the leader. And I think that to me has been one of the major turning points, is when the team becomes such a big part of it. And it's not just the leader saying, our team needs help and I'm here, Yeah, it's a fun framework. And I think, it's something that people can, the framework that Patrick Lencioni created is very simple. And so people understand it very quickly. but and they're like, oh, we should be good tomorrow on this. This is like super. And then they start working like, oh, this is harder than I thought. Okay, wait a second. How do I react to conflict and sort of understanding that? And am I okay when people get all blustery, even if, how do I
Yeah.
react to that? So I think getting through each of the phases, teams learn new skills and they have to practice those muscles. And over time, they get stronger and
Yeah.
stronger, and stronger. And then they get some results. And that's such a huge motivator for teams to be like, we did it. We had that, we high-fived. And
Yeah.
then almost like there's another level that happens after that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a fun
Well,
process to see people
you
go
know, and
through.
I think as a team member, it's okay to say, I don't know
Yeah.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Like let me go find out. Like I think sometimes we have a tendency in these groups to feel like we have to just say yes or say okay, or
Mm-hmm.
and we leave people thinking we're going to do something and then it doesn't get
Mm-hmm.
done. It's okay
Mm-hmm.
to say I don't know. It's also okay to phone a friend, right? In
Yeah.
another department
Mhm.
to say,
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure this out for my team. I need help. What are some of the other things you see, like for me as an individual? Like, what's my
Mhm.
responsibility as a member of a team? Like, how can I work on my personal team effectiveness?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think we all can, like I said, it's not just up to the leader. Like anyone could start this process. I feel like anyone on
Yeah.
the team could say, "Hey, I've got a great idea." I think first is just practicing some vulnerability with your teammates, even in one-on-one settings, like sharing something about yourself or something you're struggling with, or, hey, this is something I really want to work on this year. Could you help me? I think it all starts with just some of those one-on-one conversations and then bringing it into the team meeting and saying, hey, this is a vulnerable moment for me, but I really feel like I'm a little lost on how to go attack this and I really need everyone's help. Or I feel like I can do it, but I'm down like a resource. They just resigned yesterday. I don't know how I'm going to hit this goal.
Yeah.
So I think the leader modeling it always helps, but it can also start with the employees. I have many employees who just said, I just don't feel safe in our team environment and I want to do something about it. And like they took it on their shoulders and they brought in diversity training for their team and they met with the manager. And so,
That's awesome.
I would just say, just don't feel like you're unempowered as a team member. You can make a lot of change in your team, even if you're not the leader. So I guess that's my takeaway message for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great word. Empowerment, empowered.
Mhm.
I think it, and what's interesting to me when you are on a team, I think it's scary to
Mhm.
ask for help
Mhm.
because you think that everybody, if you know your job, you should know how to do that.
Mhm.
But I'm always amazed at when you ask people for help, how willing people are to give it to you.
Yeah.
They love that you're asking them their thoughts, their ideas, or how they might do something that then can help you with, what
Mhm.
you're trying to accomplish. So I'd say, hey, ask questions, right? And talk to other people about what they're doing. Be curious
Yeah.
because I think
Curiosity
that
is key.
can,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think, it can be simple things. Sometimes people are like, well, I want to show that I know my area. It could be sharing, or even for leaders, sometimes this is hard. Like they've been taught their whole career, never show weakness. Like that's the wrong
Right.
thing. So sometimes I just start like an offsite with, what was a key learning you had in your career? And the stories that these leaders tell are amazing. Like they didn't work out for them. They had a bad boss. They really struggled with containing their anger at work when something didn't go well, and they really worked
Yeah.
on that. And so I think some of the best leaders I've seen that are also great coaches, they bring those stories in. And like, hey, I've been in your shoes and I struggled with the same exact thing and it was tough, like
Yeah.
not like I got it right my whole career. I never struggled. So I think there's something to that, particularly for the leader to
Yeah.
say, to show that it's okay to bring that to a one-on-one, to bring it to a team meeting. And sort of when they set that tone, everyone can go, oh, okay, it must be okay to talk about this stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. Or I got fired from a job, like,
Right.
you
Mhm.
think of your manager, your leaders being sort of this person that's like nothing's ever gone wrong for them. That's how they got there. But
Right, right.
that's
Yeah.
kind of the opposite, right? I mean,
Mhm.
lots of
Mhm.
things have gone wrong, and that,
Mhm.
it's how you deal with them that
Mhm.
gets you to the next level.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
commitment you get from your employees when you have those conversations is like 100 times then. Like when I just think about the other outcomes of great teamwork and vulnerability-based trust is that employee is going to follow you through the fire. They are going to follow your next job, your next team, because they loved working with you. And
Yeah.
so, you get this commitment to you and also to the company. If they feel that from other teams as well, and that's part of your company culture, like, wow, that's a great place to work. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Are you seeing, I always ask everybody this question, whether it's relevant or not, AI is all the rage right now.
Mm.
Is AI playing any kind of role here in what you're doing or what you're experiencing from a team effectiveness perspective?
Yeah, it was funny when you were saying, oh, we should talk about AI. And I was like dreaming over a cup of coffee yesterday. Like, if I could have AI in my team effectiveness work, what would it do? Because I haven't really seen much, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's starting with meeting bots, taking notes for the team members so they can truly be present. And, it's not like the woman that's always asked to take the notes in the meeting, thank God. So it's like that we're through that. Now the AI can take care of it. But if I could design something, I think if AI can already analyze and pull together meeting notes, why can't it tell you how you're doing on productive conflict? If in most meetings, Sally never gets a word in, like I just feel like there's that next step beyond meeting notes where it says,
Yeah.
hey, your score of productive conflict this month was 9 out of 10. Good job, team. Like I was just sort of
Yeah.
thinking, like, what could AI do that would be helpful to the leader and the employees as they're on this journey trying to build these new muscles? Could it give them real-time feedback about the quality of their meetings and how much productive conflict is going on? I haven't seen that yet, but I think that would
I
be
wouldn't be
very
surprised
cool.
if somebody's not doing it, and I should know this. If Stacy was on here, she'd probably say, "Oh yeah, I know somebody who's doing that." I mean, even I use Otter as my
Mhm.
note taker, and interestingly enough, so it now has a summary of the call, so you not just the transcript,
Mhm.
and the summary is hilarious
Yeah.
because because you're always like kind of just goofing around at the beginning of a call. Hey, how's it going? What happened to you this weekend? And
Mhm.
it'll be this just really hilarious type stuff. Like so and so talked about getting booted when they broke their ankle and team effectiveness. Like it just sort of puts these things together that don't make any sense, but it's getting better. I've noticed it's nice to kind of read the summary because I can see, okay, here's where we talked about X, kind of
Mhm.
refer back to that area.
Mhm.
I'm just
Mhm.
trying to get some more context for what we were doing, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's learning, it's doing more. I think that'll be really interesting because I
Mhm.
do think when you think about teams, the team leader should be responsible for making sure that everybody is getting a voice,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
not just
Mhm.
letting people show up and not say anything on the calls. We just launched our HR system strategy cohort. And a big
Right.
part of this is being in a cohort, being part of a group that's going to learn together and learn from one another. So it's going
Mhm.
to be really interesting to sort of make sure everybody's talking and getting a chance to voice some things. And I
Mhm.
think that'll be challenging because some people just don't, they're just a little bit more shy about
Mhm.
voicing their thoughts or opinions. So it'll take a little bit of massaging to get
Right, to get everyone comfortable on that and create that great environment for them, right? To have some healthy feedback.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that we're just only scratching the surface. I think there could be a big role it plays in team effectiveness, particularly when
Yeah,
we're thinking about how meetings are run and who's talking and the level of conflict and good conflict that happened. And maybe even saying, hey, there was no alternative idea presented to this, how about I've researched the web. How are 3 other ideas the team might want to think about? I don't know. Like I'm just
yeah,
dreaming, but I
yeah.
think there's some cool stuff on the way for teams, I believe. But
Yeah, yeah. And conflict is
Mhm.
okay. I think that's
Yeah.
maybe, you know, one of the
Mhm.
messages people need to hear. It's okay to have some conflict. And that resolving conflict is the thing I think that helps you get
Mhm.
better at what you're doing. So,
Sort of
yeah,
inviting in the conflict, even when it's not there. I think great leaders I've worked with say, what's a idea? Someone play devil's advocate, even if you agree with Carolyn, it could be the best idea Carolyn's
right,
ever. Like,
right.
they create that debate for the team and make it safe. And I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest misnomer, is that high performing teams, there is no conflict. It's actually the opposite, but it's very
Yeah.
productive and it's respectful, and people feel heard, and it's about debating ideas. And you know, you don't want to get into destructive conflict where people are attacking each other. Like, that's
Right.
not what you want.
Right.
So I think it's
We have
just
a
more,
little bit of that going on in the world today.
yes, we want to keep it productive.
Just a little bit. Well, this has been awesome. Like, so one of the last questions I always ask everybody is, what's one thing you can leave the audience with today that might help them work on their team effectiveness or the effectiveness of the team that they're in? Is there one sort of thing they could do tomorrow to get them started?
Yeah, I think that's great that that's how you end it. I would say pick something that sparked your interest in this conversation and start a discussion with your teammates, and just say, wow, this was super interesting. Listen to this podcast. You know, how do you think we're doing on X, Y, and Z? And
Yeah.
just start that conversation and get the ball rolling and get people excited to have those conversations of what it might feel like to be on a great team. I think that's like an easy thing you can do. And then, you know, and just be that, feel like you're empowered to have those conversations, that you're part of that team, and you want it to be a great team. So
Yeah, I think
would
that's
leave everyone
great.
with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you're not feeling empowered, figure out how to get that feeling. Like, talk to your
Yeah.
manager, right? Like, I want to be more empowered. I want to do more. How can I, what do I need to do to get there?
Mm.
Yeah, I think that'll make all the difference.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. Don't speak up if you don't feel like you've got a voice.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, thanks, Carolyn, for joining today. This has been a great conversation. I want to thank our producers, Brand Method Media Group, and our marketing team who will put all of this great stuff out there. And thank you for tuning in. That is all the time we have for this week's episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. And we'd love it if you'd leave us a review. It only takes a minute. If you have some ideas for some topics that you want to hear, let us know that. You can also drop us a line or schedule a chat on the website. We'd love to hear from you. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.